Hey everyone, welcome to our third CRO Virtual Professional Development, or VPD as we've been calling it. We're really excited to continue our talk show style PD and have a lot of great stuff to cover today. And for those of you who are new watching and don't know about College Ready Ohio, we want to welcome you and invite you to stay and participate, ask questions. Essentially, CRO is a professional development partnership between OSU and 24 Catalyst teachers at 10 different school districts around the state of Ohio. The PD provided is to support the teachers in a train-the-trainer model for school-wide tech integration.
And this is just a small piece of what College Ready Ohio really is. But you can find out more information by going to our website, collegeready.osu.edu. You can also stay up to date by subscribing to our Google Plus page and our YouTube channel.
And speaking of YouTube channel, if you are watching the archive, please check in on the comments below. The last video has been watched by hundreds of people in the last month, and we only had 2 teachers comment. So let us know if you're watching, so that way we can give you credit. So be sure to check in.
Great. And speaking of credit, super excited. We are really pleased to share that we are currently applying to provide the Catalyst teachers with CEU credits for your participation in our program. We're still in the beginning stages and have a few things to work out for this current year as well as the coming year's events. However, at this point, it's looking like our live PD events, including next month's Innovate Conference here at OSU, are going to count towards those credits. And we're hoping to be able to give you approximately 1.4 CEU credits to offer for this school year. And the idea is to expand that number next year along with the already planned stipends from Battelle.
Yeah, and that's great news. And we'll have more information on those CEUs at the Innovate Conference. And we want to remind all our College Ready Ohio teachers to register for Innovate 2015 if you haven't already done so. Time is running out, and we really want everyone to attend because we have a lot of great stuff planned. You can register at go.osu.edu/innovate.
And last, we want to make sure that you have marked on your calendars the CRO Summer Institute in July. We have a lot of really great speakers and presenters booked, and we're really going to be doing a lot of cool hands-on workshops and giving you time to start creating and organizing content for the next school year. We sent out a quick registration form in last week's newsletter, so if you still have that, please be sure to follow the link and register. If you don't, not a big deal. The link will be in this week's newsletter as well.
Yeah, and that'll be July 15th through the 17th, so be sure to block out those dates if you haven't done so already. Also in the newsletter will be more info on the agenda, hotel, as well as location and directions for everything during the week.
Yep.
So that's probably enough chatter from us. We've been talking it up, enough housekeeping and whatnot.
Right.
We probably should get to the more important things at hand.
Right. So today we're going to be talking about alternative assessments, and alternative assessments are also known as authentic assessments. And basically alternative or authentic assessments are having the students create something that will explain their thinking or their understanding of the standard or concept that you've been teaching. We'll have a couple of guests in to share some information about their experiences, and we also have some resources and apps that we want to share with you to kind of get you started.
Yeah, and as always, Cheryl will be monitoring the chat throughout the event, so be sure to post any questions you may have for us there or for our guest. And later in the show, we'll check in on those to see how they're coming. So.
Right. All right, so let's not waste any more time, and we'll get started with our first guest, Miss Queenie Chow. Queenie is the manager of all 5 of the Ohio State University Digital Union Labs, and she's been working as a leader in the digital union space for the past 8 years, and is considered a digital content creation expert by her colleagues and her peers. Welcome, Queenie. Thanks for coming.
Great to be here.
So rumor has it you traveled all the way across the country to be here with us today.
I did. I just got back from Cozumel last night. It was awesome, but happy to be back.
How are you feeling? Any jet lag?
Not at all. It's only 1 hour difference, but I'm a little bit burnt. A little crispy.
Welcome. So we're really excited to talk to you about some of these alternative assessments, and more importantly, how Ohio State is kind of supporting what alternative assessments look like in this kind of higher ed setting. And so with you managing the digital unions, we thought it'd be a really good fit to have you come in and kind of speak of your experiences, what you're seeing out there, and talk about that. But I'm guessing a lot of people are wondering, what is a digital union?
Well, we have 5 of them spread all around campus, and I guess we'll do a little thought exercise. So you walk in, and there are super comfy chairs, nice natural daylight, really pretty much nice new computers. I don't think they're ever more than 3 years old. Mostly Macs, some PCs. There are resources for you to make videos, make websites, do spreadsheets, make graphs, kind of everything that you pretty much need to do in higher education, make lab reports or even, you know, media pieces. And I think a lot of times we talk a lot about the space and the furniture and the software, and that's great, but I can't kind of just drop you off and say, well, here's Photoshop, you know, good luck. So I want to make sure that the one thing I do mention is that one of my favorite features about the Digital Union, what kind of makes it super different than just a computer lab, is that we have staff there. I manage a team of about 20 student staff, and there's always somebody there who will be able to kind of get you up to speed on just at least the basics, and kind of anything that they can't help you with. They'll redirect you to other resources such as lynda.com that we provide for free to OSU folks. And then we can also, for higher level questions, connect people to other people we know at the university who are doing that same thing so that, you know, people can learn from each other. If we can't help, we find somebody who does.
That's really cool
Fantastic. Stuff. And I know, you know, you spoke about the comfy chairs and the natural light, but there is a Digital Union that's a little bit different and a little bit special. Yes. Do you want to talk a little bit about the Denny DU?
Yeah, I'd love to. So we have 5 Digital Unions total. 4 of them are kind of what I kind of described, where you walk in, there's a number of computers that you can go in and use. No one will bother you if you don't ever ask anything. So you can really just go in and work and have, you know, have a good time and get your work done. But if you need help, you just ask and somebody comes over. That 5th location in Denny Digital Union is basically a production space entirely. So maybe not so much editing, but there is a video conference suite. And one of my favorite things that, it's relatively new, only maybe about a year old. And one of my student staff said to me, the first time he saw it, he said, it's like video conferencing in the Death Star. Because there's kind of really nice angular lighting. It's red and black and, you know, scarlet and gray, and, you know, with some black accents, and it's just kind of a very cool space to be in. Second, we have a professional level audio recording studio there that we partnered with the music school to build. And so in terms of hardware, software, microphones, all that stuff. And then the 3rd space we're really excited about is the video studio that we modeled off of Penn State's one button studio. So you take a USB drive, you go in, plug in your USB drive, you hit one button, and it'll just start recording you. And when you're finished, you hit that button, and it'll stop. You can take your USB drive out, and you have your video uploaded as an MP4.
Wow.
And the whole time, you didn't have to even touch or know anything about lights, microphones, cameras, all these things that you can't see in the frame right now. So as a very totally normal person who doesn't know anything about these things, you can still go in and get a video made, which is kind of incredible.
It is really awesome.
That's awesome.
So I'm interested. Obviously, Ohio State is investing a lot of time, energy, and money into these Digital Union spaces. I'd be curious to see why you think the university is putting so much energy into these types of spaces. And is there any other, I mean, I know you mentioned Penn State, but are there any other universities around the country that you've seen that are doing things similar, or where does Ohio State sit in the realm of other universities when it comes to this?
Yeah, I think there are certainly a lot of other universities who are doing interesting things, and we have efforts a few times during the year where we will actually go out and see what other people are doing, share ideas, and it's, you know, it's kind of always the case where we do something a little bit better or differently than somebody else does, but then they also do something a little bit better and differently than, you know, than we do, and we just kind of swap ideas and make it happen. So I wouldn't be so, you know, egotistical to say we're the best. I'm sure that's kind of subjective and maybe not even true, but we definitely try our best. We do have, I know from our stats that we have a 95% customer satisfaction rating, so
that's awesome.
Pretty excited about that. So I think kind of your question about why is it worth it to Ohio State, one of the main things that we try to do is we are not a production service. So in telling you what we're not, let me tell you what we are. We're not a production service, so you don't just kind of drop something off and say, well, here, graph this for me, here, convert this to a DVD for me. Our whole goal is to be an educational lab where we teach people how to be self-sufficient. So they come in and they say, I want to make a video, either it's part of my assignment or I need to make, you know, content for my class or whatever the case may be. I don't know anything about any of this stuff. Where do I start? This is kind of crazy. And whereas before, if somebody just handed you this video thing or you had an idea for a video thing, you knew nothing, you probably would just kind of maybe not do it because you don't have the resources.
Yeah.
Sure.
But you can come in and say, how do I do this? And we have staff there who would be like, okay, what do you have already? And let's see how to get you toward getting that piece of content created. So I think the fact that it is designed so that it makes you self-sufficient and it teaches you the skills that you would need to have, it if you're a student, it prepares you really well for your job later on. I don't know anyone who I work with or who's probably watching who only does what's in their, originally hired job description. Everybody has a flyer they need to make sometimes, or something they need to graph, or whatever the case may be. So I think these basic skills are really important for people to have.
That's awesome. I'm ready to go work on it.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, you talked about people getting hired and doing stuff outside the realm of the job description, but I think Aaron and I were chatting at one point. You don't ever apply for a job to be a test taker or a quiz taker or an essay writer. So I feel like the university is really pushing a lot more of these creation-based type of assessment tools to prepare people to collaborate and to work together and to create things. And is that something that you're seeing teachers push their students to do that kind of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sometimes it's really just it's the best way, or, it's the best way for people to demonstrate their skills aside from, say, a Scantron or a multiple choice test. So one of the instances I think about is, for instance, one of the ASL classes at OSU, instead of writing a paper or whatever, that's American Sign Language, by the way.
Thanks.
So they need to make sure that people know how to sign, so you can't really write that down. And so one of their assignments is they'll have people come in and just record themselves signing. So we kind of help people, whether they just need a webcam or if they want to use the fancier studio, we help them get that file, and if they need to trim it or add anything to it, we can help with that, and that gets submitted as an assignment so that people can show that they know how to do what the course was teaching. Other things such as, maybe the art and tech students might need to do something that's a little bit more, I guess, artistic. So I guess in terms of assessment, when you think about your rubric with things, just as you do with everything else, you think about what's important to you in this assignment. So if you're the ASL instructor, you don't really maybe care if once in a while there's a door that you hear in the background, or the lighting's not perfect. It kind of doesn't matter. As long as you can see that person making the proper signs for the assignment, then that's fine. So even if you do consider those things, you'd weigh them a little bit less. Yeah. If you're the art and tech instructor who's really, kind of making sure that, I don't know, you're doing something a little bit more creative, or you're playing with the different elements that video, for instance, affords, then you would weigh, for instance, lighting, audio, format, things like that a little bit more heavily, and kind of extend that to whatever your assignment is.
Right. So part of this is all for our high school teachers. All of this, and they're preparing their students for college, for some for OSU. What are some things that you're seeing our students doing that would benefit our high school teachers to know about?
Well, I think all of us at some point in time need to get really good at giving presentations. So, it doesn't necessarily mean PowerPoint, but that's certainly one thing. I mean, that's just a tool, but I think there's a lot of underlying principles, obviously, to giving good presentations, but the point is so that, we don't make technology the barrier necessarily. So, if you need to brush up on public speaking, or if you need to brush up on how to make a good presentation, that's fine, but if you're really just maybe scared to get into PowerPoint, or you're scared to get into InDesign or Photoshop or what have you, well then we're going to say, what's your idea? Let us kind of fill that gap and let you get that idea out.
Very cool. So obviously in the digital union, you're seeing a lot of creation going on and collaboration. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's more the student's choice and preference on how they want to work on things, or do you think teachers are really pushing out that effort to go out and create rather than just take a final or a midterm or whatever it may be?
I think it can be a bit of both. It kind of depends on the dynamics of the specific group too. So to be very honest with you, it can be kind of hard sometimes. Students kind of say, oh, I hate group work, and usually you hear that from the high achievers who kind of are like, I'm doing all the work. But I mean, there are ways to get around that, I suppose. Such as maybe the way that you structure the assessment for group work, for instance. But we do find people coming in and collaborating when they can. We provide the space and the extra chairs and things like that to make that happen. And part of what the DU does is, I think I mentioned this before, but if we can't help them with their particular thing, then we can find somebody who can. So that means if you come to kind of a tight computer lab with kind of 1 chair per seat and 3 inches between computers, well, it's going to make it kind of hard for you to collaborate with somebody else. But we do see a lot of student groups who come in who take advantage of our meeting spaces that allow you to project your device to the screen, for instance, kind of lay out your materials and get everything in order. So I definitely think it's a very great space for that, and there's definitely a value in providing that for people when they do need it.
Very cool. I know another thing that Erin and I were talking about at one point was the digital storytelling workshops and things that you guys do, that you I think yourself host and kind of house at the Digital Unions. Can you speak on that a little bit and what that experience is like and what the initiative is all about?
Yeah. So we have a digital storytelling program here at Ohio State, and our core committee consists of just a handful of us who really care about the program, and so we it's evolving a lot. So I'm happy to answer any questions people have after, but it's a 3-day program where we take proposal submissions for people who have story ideas, and we take them through a couple story circles. They write their script, they get feedback from other people who are in the group, which people tell us consistently that that's their favorite part of that whole process, is getting to sit in a circle and getting everybody to read their scripts and getting that really great feedback from everyone. So we help everyone in that process with kind of how to write a good script and thinking about attention-getting devices and thinking about like narrative and story arc and all those things. So you can kind of see these themes, even though we're talking in this case about eventually a video, are kind of all the same terms you would use with a paper.
Right.
Or even, thinking about literature. So it's so basically the first day we do scripts, the second day people kind of finish those up, make sure they have all of their assets, so photos, sounds, any kind of interview, audio, things like that. And then the third day is just the work day. So you take your script, you take all of your components, and you dump it into something such as iMovie or video editor of your choice, and you put it all together, and by the end of 3 days, everybody has pretty much a finished video. And I've been talking a lot about video, but it's kind of,
it's easy.
We see it a lot, and it also incorporates a lot of things. So we definitely don't only do video, or even mostly do video, but that's kind of a complicated example because that's the one that kind of takes from everything else. It's a culmination.
Sure. So if our teachers were going to take digital storytelling, turn around and use it tomorrow in their classroom as an assessment, what do you think would be the most important piece? Like, what do you think would be the part that they just definitely need to do?
I would say the story circle. I think, honestly, the technology, there's so many resources out there to learn, and that's not the hard part. So I think the hard part is really just being a good writer, especially when you're young. So I know, for instance, when I was in high school and even really all throughout college, I was a really terrible writer, and I just didn't know ever what I was doing or what was good writing or what was bad and things like that. But going through the process and having somebody take your script and kind of dissect it and help you understand what makes an interesting story, for instance, right. I think that's really important. So as I said, from the feedback we got, kind of that personal connection was really the most important part. So if you're thinking about that in distance ed settings, it's not to say that it has to be, hey, you're right next to me, I can touch you, but it could be that you have a webinar. That you have
touch.
Exactly. It's like, oh God. So it could just be that you would organize, for instance, a webinar where you could simulate a story circle where everybody could sit and read their script and everybody else could provide feedback.
That's a really cool idea. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have with Queenies, but we do want to thank you for coming out and sharing what you're seeing along the lines of assessment and creation here at Ohio State and higher ed in general. Real quick, do you want to plug any of I know you're a big networker, plug into your blog or Twitter or anything like that maybe some of our teachers can reach out to you?
I try to post as much as I can on the blog. It's been a little bit slow lately since I've got a lot of projects, but I think Scott is sharing that with everybody, so feel free to check it out. Hopefully it'll pick up a little bit more, but there's some good resources on there, and I mean, more importantly, my contact information is on there, so if you have anything you need, just feel free to email me and I can kind of provide a more personal consultation.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, Queenie. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up in just a couple of minutes, we have our next two guests joining us to talk about alternative assessments in both higher ed and in the K-12 environment. We're really excited to feature another one of our very own College Ready Ohio teachers who've been doing some really great stuff with students both in and outside of his classroom to make learning and assessing more meaningful. And you'll see what we mean in just a second.
Yeah, and we're also having an OSU assistant professor in the School of Journalism, of all things, who has traded out her pen for a stylist and is moving the field into the 21st century.
But before we get started with our next guest, we wanted to take a couple of minutes to share some apps and resources that would be a great place to start if you're looking for ways to do alternative assessments in your classroom.
Yeah, and another one of our CRO teachers, Dr. Steve Kaczynski, actually is awesome enough to send us a video of some of the ways he is doing alternative assessments at Dublin Kaufman High School. So we want to take a minute to take a look at what he sent us.
This demo is designed to show how you can use Explain Everything in the Classroom with iPads to allow students to do a better job of showing what they've learned and doing a better job of assessing them, making it more interesting, and all the great things that allow for you to see what students have learned in the classroom without just doing the standard paper pencil test. So standard level freshman year English, you're going to read Animal Farm, maybe going to talk about propaganda and all the ways it's used in there. And so quite commonly you'll teach the definitions and have the students maybe match them up, maybe do some identifying of them. So that's a good way to start off this project and just think about how we can best see what students know in that regard. So obviously the higher up we can get on this taxonomy, the better. It's nothing wrong with starting down here, but very quickly in a unit you could be working on applying as well as analyzing, then creating, and then really evaluating and assessing different elements of propaganda. So here's your basic matching, which is a nice way to get started, but fairly low on Bloom's taxonomy, and you can see it despite any effort to make it a little more creative by putting it on Schoology and making it clickable. It's still fairly low, fairly basic recall. Schoology does allow you to import video into something like a quiz, and so it is definitely still more realistic here. Actual commercials imported for students to view and identify, but again, very teacher-driven and very much presented in a fairly routine fashion. Well, then you're going to get real serious. You're going to bust out the glue and the scissors and the magazines. You're going to have them do a collage and show actual propaganda in action, and that's fun and interactive, and they're going to do more than circle answers. So let's see what that looks like. Not bad, lots of fun. You cleaned up all the scraps and you threw away all the magazines, and you have some examples that are labeled and maybe even explanations provided, but again, it's fairly static and it doesn't necessarily show true understanding, but it's better than circling answers on a test, that's for sure. But imagine how cool it would be if we flip this all around and let the students show us what they've learned. Give them the parameters, have them show you what they have in action, label it, talk about it, and they need an iPad and a little bit of time and a little bit of coaching to do that, and the results are going to be phenomenal. So in this system, you give the students the parameters and the tools, and you set them free to do it how they want, as long as they can show you what they've learned, and that this pulls in their creativity and allows them to approach the assessment from a unique point of view, perhaps something you hadn't even thought of as the instructor. Students could get on Google and save images of actual advertisements such as this one, then take a closer look so that they've not only found it, but then they're discussing what's going on in it instead of having you hand it to them and having them just see what's already been presented. Once they've imported the ad, they could then record a talk-through of what they noticed going on. For example, they've noticed the results not typical card stacking technique here, the multiple uses of glittering generalities such as wonder herb, clinically proven, and they can just discuss in their own words how this advertisement evidences the propaganda techniques that they've been studying. Making it even more interesting, students can find their own commercials on YouTube or on the internet, and they could pick one and import it as a video and talk through what they hear as propaganda going on in those commercials as they scroll on the screen. So once students have imported the video, they could run the video, talk over what they see and hear, also stop the video and annotate anything they'd like to show.
There's some facts about SeaWorld we'd like you to know.
We don't collect killer whales from the wild and haven't for 35 years.
With the highest standard of animal care in the world.
For example, we say, stop right there. What do you mean by highest standard? In whose definition? And is this source perhaps biased? I'd like to read more about that. That's something a student can do without any direction from the teacher whatsoever. Then to really bring this home, students can take a walk with the iPad in the school hallways, in the lunchroom, in their classrooms, maybe even at home. They could see some propaganda live and in color and import it into the presentation and talk through how this is not just advertisements, this is not just something that's on TV, this is in our daily lives. Maybe students have walked by a bulletin board in the hallway many times, but they haven't stopped to look at the word choice, the loaded language perhaps of how we as teachers, even as school systems, use glittering generalities or loaded language to try to make things sound a little better. And these are things they see every day, and they can import them into their presentation and show what they've learned just by walking around. Also, something that they see every day in a classroom that they've now made a connection. They can take pictures of that with the iPad, import it into Explain Everything, do a talk through, and talk a little bit about how we as teachers, once again, can sometimes use propaganda to impact how students view certain elements and impact their behavior. You can even assign the students to develop some of their own original propaganda. For example, what student wouldn't want to talk the teacher into giving him or her an A in the class using ethos, pathos, and logos?
Your job now is to convince me why you should get an A in the class.
Okay, so I should get an A in this class because according to a researcher at Stanford University, students who work hard should get the best grades.
Oh, I deserve an A in this class because I have stayed up till 1 o'clock in the morning every night working on my paper and very stressed. And
I should get an A in this class according to Dr. Smith from Stanford. 4 in 5 kids are happier once they receive A's, so yeah.
So putting this all together, this activity flips everything around and lets the students do the work and show what they know. It's higher on Bloom's taxonomy. It allows them to create and explain and expand and synthesize. It's much more student engagement friendly. It's much more fun and creative. And frankly, as a teacher, it's much more interesting to evaluate. All the features seen in this demo were used with Explain Everything, importing video, pictures, doing live recordings, all the screen captures and annotations, and it took less than an hour to do all of this. There's not a lot of bells and whistles in it. There doesn't need to be. It's just much more likely to give you an authentic assessment, which I think all of us would agree is better for everybody.
So thank you, Steve, for sending us that. Hopefully if that helps some of you guys out there see what they're doing at Dublin. If you have any questions, feel free to email us or reach out to Steve, and I'm sure he'll be happy to answer them. But right now we want to take a couple minutes to welcome and introduce our next two guests, Nicole Kraft and Ben Clutter. Nicole is an assistant professor in the School of Communication with a focus on journalism and is well known locally and nationally for many of her iTunes U courses and for winning OSU's first Digital First Impact grant that put iPads in the hands of all our news writing students, better preparing them for, quote I say, today in ever-changing mobile world.
And we also want to welcome Ben Clutter, one of our College Radio Ohio teachers from Cardinal High School in Geauga County. Ben teaches biology, anatomy, and physiology and is getting ready to take his 8th grade students to Costa Rica to study ecology abroad. Ben is also an adjunct faculty for the College of Ed at Grand Canyon University and has a double master's with a focus on how technology can aid student instruction and understanding. So thanks for making the drive down to be with us on such short notice, Ben. And we also really want to take a second to thank your principal for being so supportive of College Radio Ohio and allowing you to just come down from so far up.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
So needless to say, by both of your resumes, you're obviously very proficient with technology and education, and hopefully can help us with some discussion along using technology for assessments.
Yeah.
So.
Very good. So Nicole, we're just going to go ahead and start with you.
Ladies first.
Yes, exactly. How long have you been supplementing alternative assessments for traditional tests?
I do very few traditional assessments. I'm not a big proponent, and I think part of it lends itself to what I teach in general. So The fact is that I teach journalism for the most part, and in order for students to be able to get jobs in the real world, they have to prove that they can do it. One of the things that I tell them when they're here is that we're now their first job. So all the mistakes that they're going to make, they need to make here. All of the challenges they're going to face, we're going to present to them, so that when they leave here, they're ready to go out and get employed and stay employed. So we really make it as close to a real world news experience as we can for them, and so all of their assessments revolve around real life news experiences, reporting, writing, research, using social media, multimedia, enterprising stories, things like that.
And do you find when you get new students that they're prepared for that environment?
No, that's not true. You know, I joke with them, I think we standardized tested their creativity out of them, to be honest.
Yeah.
And they have a really hard time. They want to be assessed.
Right.
They want to have a rubric. They want to be, you know, they're very specific about how they would like their, how to be judged on their skills. And they really would like to be tested on, you know, definitions and fill in the blanks and have short answers. And I tell them that, you know, there's no syllabus in life, and there's not going to be a rubric for life either. So, you know, I do give them a rubric, but but I do, you know, their expectations are that they can go out and do real world activities and show that they're moving forward in that kind of progress. So we do a lot of, I'll send them out just randomly to with a subject to say you need to go find sources and write an article related to this in an hour. I need you to go out and one of the assignments we had for them was to go out and use either Meerkat or Periscope and go out and live stream a real event and get sources for that, and then come back in and write a story. So we're doing a lot of that, you know, really incorporating all the different tools of journalism and assessing them in that way.
Really
Fantastic, yeah. That's going to be so powerful in the university setting, no matter what major you're in.
Yeah.
So Ben, you're a high school teacher, as opposed to at the university level. How long have you been sort of swaying from the traditional tests and gearing more towards that alternative test assessment? Sorry.
My first year teaching, I was with a colleague teacher who showed me some of the projects that he had done as a student teacher, and I was teaching chemistry and he had taught chemistry. Currently he's now my administrator, Mr. Hunter, and he showed me these projects that he had done. He talked about them and told me how he had used rubrics to assess the students, and how it gave them another way outside of testing, another method that was for the different learning styles of the students to convey information.
Yeah.
And ever since that first year teaching, the first thing I've done whenever I've taken on a new class is to set up my assessments first, particularly the alternative assessments. Things that are authentic, things that will actually test the student knowledge and understanding more so than the black and white, you know, fill in the blank or multiple choice. I still give a traditional assessment for each unit, but every unit there is some type of authentic assessment tied in with the traditional assessments as well.
Deeper level learning, gotcha.
Yeah, with your students taking these alternative assessments, have you seen an improvement in their understanding and comprehension of the tasks? And this can go for both of you, so obviously you see it at different levels.
I found definitely. When students can find meaning and relevancy behind the material that they're learning, it has a deeper impact that stays with them.
We actually worked on a research project over the last year that looked at how we utilized, in our case we were utilizing the iPads, and how we took what was conventional learning and we utilized the iPads with iTunes U and these alternative assessments, and we actually saw a really dramatic improvement in terms of the speed in which our students were learning the material, whereas teaching them more conventionally, we had maybe 7 or 8 weeks before they created publishable materials. Using alternative assessments and alternative teaching methods, we were actually able to get them down to 3 weeks one semester and 2 weeks the next semester that they were published in our student media source, which is the Lantern Media. So, you know, what we've really seen is that if we can engage students in ways that sort of meet them where they want to learn, that they're much more inspired to learn.
Wow, that's inspiring. It really is. So, what are your thoughts, like, from a pedagogical standpoint? I love that word. you know, memorization versus that really deep understanding. So for example, you know, what are your thoughts on when you're asking the student to prove that they understand a concept versus asking them to just repeat back information that they've memorized?
I don't know if you want to tackle this one, because there's not a lot of, in terms of memorization, I mean, I do teach media law, so there is a degree of memorization that goes in there, but in the same way, for them to write a paper, I don't really feel like they're going to feel and understand what the law or what ethics mean to them as it comes into journalism. So instead, we do like role playing, where we'll have them become Supreme Court justices, and they'll hear a case based on real events. And they say to me every semester that brings to life to them, to a much greater degree, the things that they need to learn. We have them put together multimedia packages on an ethical issue that is in the news today. So something like the Rolling Stone article on college rape. So they'll put together a multimedia piece, and they'll look at how a situation like that occurred, what are the ramifications for journalism. They'll interview real journalists, and all of that brings together, and they have to apply ethical theory. So rather than me saying, explain to me what utilitarianism is, they can start to look at how that would be applicable in a real life ethical situation.
As a science teacher, there's definitely some memorization that has to take place, particularly like in my anatomy and physiology class. But on the other hand, it's not nearly as important as the understanding. For example, yes, it's important to know the muscles of the body, but it's more important to understand how those muscles work and how you will be applying them in the field. Same thing with biology. When I talk about ecology, I talk about symbiotic relationships and the difference between mutualism and commensalism and parasitic relationships. But I keep coming back to that throughout the whole year. It isn't like memorize this and that's all. Yeah. I want the students to bring back to me, hey, this is an example of a mutualistic relationship because both of these organisms are getting a benefit. And so throughout the year, I'll continue to ask them, you know, what type of relationship is this? And at some point, it just begins to click, and they begin to tell me before I say anything to them. So by the end of the year, they have a deep understanding of it, and that's most important to me. It's not so much that, hey, I've memorized this vocabulary term and they can fill it out on a test.
Yeah.
It's that they actually can apply it.
Right. So by having that deeper understanding and by continually revisiting, they're essentially learning that vocabulary instead of just memorizing the vocabulary for in both cases, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
So when you guys are putting together or coming up with the idea to create an assessment, and maybe there's a time and a place for both of this, but how much free rein are you giving students to kind of create their own outcome or project or path, and how much of it is more structured? This is the project, this is what I want to look like, this is how I want it to come. And where is the time and place for that, and what's it look like?
For me, I'm working on becoming more and more open. When I first started with authentic assessments, I was very rigid in that, you know, it had to be a poster and it had to be this size. Now I'm to the point with technology where I'm looking at more opportunities. I'm trying to present student choice so that there's different opportunities for different learners. And I start with the learning objective and say, all right, this is what we want to learn, this is what I want you to show me, and if you can come up with another way of showing it to me, I'm all ears, and let's talk about it and work with it.
Yeah, I've sort of gone all the way over to that side of things. I have very loose structures because, you know, in a lot of ways, the people that by the time they come to me, they have some idea as to what they want to be, and I need to help foster that in them. So unlike something like biology, which everyone is responsible for taking, and whether you're interested in biology or not, people who come to me and are journalism majors would like to be engaged in journalism for the most part, or in my law classes, there's people who, you know, would like to go to law school or political science or things like that. So really looking at ways that we can bring in their own investment and identifying what is it that would inspire them to work, you know, better, stronger, and faster. So all of their ideas are their own. I don't assign any ideas to them. I'll give them a framework for it, but it'll be our midterm, for example, in our news writing class is I'll give them a topic like food.
Yeah.
and they're responsible for going out, finding an article topic, getting it, they'll tweet it to me, they'll get it approved by me, they'll go out, find sources, they'll write the story, they'll shoot photos, they'll record a video, and they'll do all of that in 24 hours. So, the freedom is theirs to do whatever format they think is going to fit, whatever subject matter they think readers will be engaged in, as long as they fit the requirement, which is we need multiple pieces of media, and we need a pretty well-written story.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I was going to say, along those lines, obviously, when you're grading so many different types of mediums or materials or this wide range, do you create a rubric to do that, or how do you kind of grade and assess so many different types of products on the same assignment?
I mean, for mine, they start with, the most successful one is publishable. So if you fit the criteria for being publishable, if it's something other people would want to consume, and they would have a clearer idea of what the story's about or what the project's about, they have, you follow the style rules that we have in journalism. So that's the kind of rubric that I'll put in, as opposed to it being an incredibly detailed rubric. It's a fairly broad stroke, but that it fits the criteria. So it's either publishable, it needs revision, it's a first draft, or we're going back to the drawing board. And if you fit whatever criteria that is, and which how the points are assessed to that, then that's how we assign your final grade.
For me, I am looking for some specific connections to the learning objective. For example, if I'm assigning a project on photosynthesis, such as create a children's book on photosynthesis, I'm looking specifically that they mention the compounds are being used, sunlight being used, the products are being produced, and putting it in a meaningful way that makes sense. And so within that loose framework, I'm looking for some specific things, and if they hit it, great. If they don't make it, then I give them the opportunity to correct, edit, and master the content. And I think they get a deeper understanding because they say, oh, this is the mistake I made. Now I understand. Fix it and resubmit.
I think that's a really key thing that you touched on.
Yeah, the concept of mastery learning and mastery grading is it's difficult for a lot of people to sort of wrap their heads around, and it's difficult to kind of start implementing. Since you're already doing that to a degree, definitely, what just some tips that you might want to give, because in a traditional testing situation, there is no mastery. You get it, you get graded, and you move on. So in this situation, you can do that. So do you have any ideas or tips or tricks?
Tips or tricks? I mean, I think you have to be really open-minded, and I think you have to work with your administrators to be equally open-minded, because it's a big change. And people who teach more conventionally than you do will often, I don't know if you've experienced this, but there's a lot of questions about why you do things the way that you do, and because we do so many different things that go beyond papers and tests. I had one person who was critical in the sense that it was someone from outside, but made a comment about it being for younger learners than people in college. And I said, just because you're in college doesn't mean you don't want to have a good time learning, or we don't have an obligation to try to make this something that engages you. And we seem to have this image that for people, the more mature they get, that we have to lecture to them, and we need to make them sit in a desk and listen to us pontificate on different subjects. And I'm all about having a good time and learning at the same time, and I'm far more engaged when I feel like I'm contributing to my learning in some way. So I think that's the fundamental piece of it, is to remember that each person that we teach is an individual, and each person learns in their own way, and we can still look at them and seek mastery for them in whatever the subject matter happens to be, but approach them as an individual with individual needs and individual desires.
That's really good.
I think the key there is the engagement. When a student takes ownership of their learning, they become more engaged, and you do have to be willing to keep an open mind and willing to work with the circumstances as they present themselves, and with the learner with their best learning style.
Yeah. So this is kind of a hot button topic, and directed more at you, Ben, since you're kind of in the K-12 setting, but Nicole, feel free to hop on since you've experienced life after that and the students, how they're prepared. But obviously standardized testing is a huge hot topic in K-12. And so how do you balance, or do you feel pressure of, okay, I need to prepare these students for these standardized tests coming up, and there's a lot of pressure on me to get them ready. So do I take time away from preparing them for that standardized test just to do these creation alternative assessments? Or is there a way to balance that, or what do you feel like?
I don't feel it takes away. I feel that when they have deeper understanding, because you don't know what the test question is going to be. You can't say, well, these questions are definitely going to be on there. I mean, I've said to students, yes, the term prokaryote will show up somewhere on the test, but let's understand what a prokaryote or a eukaryote is and have deep understanding of that, so that way it doesn't matter how they word the question or how they come about it, they can answer the question and get it correct. When they are presenting for me for their genetic disorders, they create a pamphlet or some type of presentation of a disorder, and then they present and talk to the class. It doesn't take very long for the students to pick up that I'm very concerned about how the genetic disorders are inherited, how they're passed on. So many times the students are starting to ask some of the similar questions, and they get a better understanding of X-linked traits, of incomplete dominance and complete dominance, of trisomy, and they're the ones who are then leading the questions to their peers and making better connections.
That's really good. And do you, I mean, and maybe that goes to the point where we said students aren't coming to higher ed prepared for these creations and alternative assessments. Do you think that it is because there's so much pressure on these standardized tests that some teachers are afraid to get away from that typical rigor of standardized tests? I know it's a touchy kind of topic.
You know, I'll be the first to acknowledge that I've opted my son out of the standardized test. He's 14, and I don't believe in standardized testing. I believe talented teachers should be assessing our students. So, you know, what I see at the other end is students who are afraid to be creative. They're afraid to, you know, it's a cliche, but to think outside the box, or to approach things in a different way, because we're working so hard to make sure that they fit whatever standard is going to be deemed to be appropriate for them. And it's a very difficult time to be a teacher now. I admire you greatly, and I admire all the teachers that I've met. My husband's a teacher. I meet many wonderful teachers who are doing an amazing job within the framework. It saddens me when I see the students who come to me and they meet with me on a daily basis and talk to me about their grades and how important their grades are and these points and, you know, all these things. I said, like, no one's going to look at your GPA in the world. Your GPA is not the end-all be-all of your life. You have to think about how you learn, what compels you to want to learn new things. How can you apply those things to become the person you'd like to be? And I think if we could start to recognize that from the earliest levels and realize that if we're striving so hard to get them to fit into some compartment that is determined by a standardized test, we're really limiting the people that they perceive themselves to be able to be, and that's the part that concerns me the most.
Right. That's a really good message to send to all teachers. I wish it was easier to take it and internalize it and say, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
But they're in a scary position. I mean, you know, they're being gauged on those types of assessments, and I think whenever you're going to have that kind of challenge in front of you, you know, people who can go outside of the norm and teach people, that's even more admirable. But every teacher who's teaching today and working within this framework is really doing just amazing work.
And I think with alternative assessments, you have more of a chance to breach the achievement gap, because you have, I think it benefits all learners rather than just the learners who can memorize or can get it the first time through, or even hardly pay attention in class and they get it and breeze through it. It's going to get them, but the people it's really going to help and benefit are the ones who are struggling, the ones who are trying to get there, and when you meet them at their learning style, then they now have a chance, they now have a foundation to build on.
Yeah. When I know for me, when I was going through school, I really struggled with that standardized box test and learning style, but out in the real world where I have an opportunity to think outside the box and be creative, I really excel, and I wish that when I was going through school I had more teachers that would encourage that. So I applaud you guys both for doing that and changing the way things have traditionally been done for so long.
Most definitely.
So, well, we always want to take some time towards the end of the show to share some more apps and resources. So, if either of you brought anything or would like to show, I know Ben, I think you brought some stuff down that you might be able to pull up for us and show what you've been working on up there in Northeast Ohio. See if we can get it to connect to the Apple TV. I think it's up there.
So the first thing I have here is a project I did this year. This is a children's photosynthesis book. The premise was to take photosynthesis and make it very, very simple for students. Describe it to a 3rd to 5th grade student. And what I looked here for, this student chose Monsters, Inc. and there was a variety of them, and they have a script there. They had to have a minimum of 5 pages, and they had to have 1 picture per page. And I break photosynthesis down into 5 steps, so it works out pretty well for them. Sometimes they add something to introduce it. And so here he's talking about energy and the photosynthesis process, and he mentions that it's 5 steps, and he talks about plants capturing sunlight. So that's one thing I'm definitely going to be looking for, is that he's talking about the plant capturing sunlight. And then here he's talking about making food and how it serves as energy for the plant. And so these are all little things I'm looking for. I'm going to look for discussing oxygen, oxygen being released, and then carbon dioxide coming into the plant, and in the end that it makes glucose or sugar, and just being in child-friendly language.
That's really cool.
Another thing that I have, this is an upcoming project that my students are actually going to be working on. Actually, in 2 days we're going to the Cleveland Zoo.
All right.
And my students, here we go. Why is this? Well, I'll just scroll through it this way. What they'll do is they're going to take pictures. Now, this was obviously not taken at the Cleveland Zoo, but this student took this picture on vacation, and they have listed the date where it was taken. But see, this was taken at the Cleveland Zoo. And so what they're going to do then is they're going to classify the organisms. They're going to take the pictures, upload them to Google Drive, and we will download them at the school, and they can put them in Google Slides, and they will classify the organisms and then put them in correct order, almost like recreating a cladogram. And there's certain requirements, like they have to have a certain number of invertebrates, a certain number of animals from each class and order. There's a certain level they have to classify them to, but the students really get engaged in the relationships of the animals and how they're classified, and understanding taxonomy to a much deeper level. The thing I'm most excited about is I have upcoming the Costa Rica trip, in which I'm taking 16 students from Cardinal High School
and
to
2
Costa Rica.
CRO staff members, right?
That's us.
And what we have here is, this is a web page that I've created for our students. They're going to be able to complete more or less a course, and this is going to be completely alternative assessment. There's not going to be any paper and pencil tests to this, but this is these were pictures that I took in Costa Rica. So here we have an intro, and here we have a slideshow from when we were in Costa Rica, some things that they'll be learning about, and I have a little further down an intro video that I got from Crash Course Ecology from YouTube. And then what they'll do is they'll complete this web quest, and here are different regions that we will be visiting while in Costa Rica. And so the responsibility beforehand is to go to these different web pages that I've created and answer questions, watch the videos. Sometimes I have an article that they're going to go read. Sometimes I will have a video to watch from YouTube, some quotes, and then they have to answer discussion questions as well, where, for example, one of the questions is to discuss well, there's a video about this dam in Brazil that is relocating many of the natives, and in Costa Rica there is a hydroelectric dam that was done much more politically correct.
Yeah.
They were much they communicated much better. They were much more concerned about the environment. And then the students are then to read up on that information and then find a national park in the U.S. and how it was created and compare and contrast. And that's going to be their discussion post. And so that's how I'll evaluate them before they go on a trip. Then when we're on a trip, they'll actually visit that lake. We kayak on that lake. And they'll actually get to see it. And then what we'll do, the students then will use this app, Weebly, to create their own more or less web page. It will be a photo journal, and so the students can just go here to edit, and they can add an image that they take while on a trip. And so I will give them a list of terms of things I want them to, drag it, sorry. And then you can actually go and take something from Dropbox, recently added photos, and they can say, all right, so here's a bromeliad. We talked about this. These form a symbiotic relationship with frogs, and they will hear that on the tour, and it makes them more engaged with the tour director and with me on the trip, because I'll say things about ecology, or the tour director will say things about ecology, and I want them to be engaged in the learning, not just on the trip to zipline, which we do, and that's fun, that's great, but I want them to also have a learning experience. So they can insert pictures, they can insert videos. Just a note, you do have to have the paid version of Weebly in order to insert HD videos, but you can upload it to YouTube for free, and they can drag over and add a YouTube video down here, and all they've got to do is type in the link, and there you go. Nice. So and they can add sub pages from the different days if they choose. There will be requirements for them during the basically discussion topics. They're going to have a video each day and a couple of photos each day about something that they learned. And then the the final exam, I guess, is they're going to come up with a community service project proposal, and that proposal then will be their final grade. I want them to take something from Costa Rica, something that they learned, some concept, and apply it to the community they live in, some way of impacting. I'm leaving it pretty wide open because I want them to create this and have ownership of it. Then my hope is that maybe as some sort of follow-up, because they do have to have community service to graduate, or possibly even as like a flex credit or something like that, then to encourage some of the students to actually combine maybe a couple other projects and then do a community service and then have an impact in the community in which they live.
Yeah, that's really awesome stuff.
Yeah, it is. That's can we follow along with this summer, since we don't
yes.
get to go to Costa Rica?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and post the my page for confidentiality reasons, and that's actually an excellent reason to use Weebly, because the students can password protect their photo journals and stuff, and it will give them a portfolio also for college. I did forget to mention that. That's another great thing about this, is it gives them something to share with anyone that's interviewing them, any college application process, and I think it will be great. But I will leave my link out. I'm going to share it with College Ready Ohio, so you guys can actually see the WebQuest process and maybe some of the things from the trip that we do.
That would be fantastic. If you could post it on our your page, on our Google Plus page, that would be wonderful.
Absolutely, I will do that.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Well, it looks like we're running short on time, but we want to thank both Nicole and Ben for coming on to share their experience on the alternative assessments with us today. Really great stuff, guys. And if anyone has any questions for either Aaron, myself, or obviously any of our guests, always remember to leave those in the comments below, or feel free to email us anytime. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Well, as always, before we let you guys go, we always have to give a homework assignment, or an artifact as we like to call it. So that way we're not calling it homework, but Aaron has artifact 3 to present for you guys. So Aaron, what are we going to ask the teachers to do this time?
So what we would like for you to do is please choose a lesson that you would like to do an alternative assessment with, as opposed to a traditional test. And we realize that this fits really nicely with the whole flipped learning. So if you have not submitted your flipped learning lesson and you would like to take that and do an alternative assessment with that, we are more than happy to take all of that together. So what you just need to think about is are you going to, what is your rubric going to look like? Is there going to be student choice involved in that? Are you going to allow your students to work with you to create the rubric? And then when you're all done, if you would just email us the assessment and the rubric, and then of course without student names and grades, if you could send us 2 or 3 sample assessments, maybe on a scale, did really well, met the minimum, or just is still confused, and maybe then think about, is this an opportunity to work on that mastery, and is this student going to be able to try again? And all of that can be done if you can have it submitted to us by May 29th, then we would just really appreciate it.
Excellent.
Thanks.
Well, that does it for us. So we hope you enjoyed our virtual professional development on alternative assessments. Again, we want to thank our guests for their time. And as always, all of you for joining us.
And if you have any questions about anything, please don't hesitate to send us an email at collegereadyohio@osu.edu, or you can also hit us up on our Google Plus page.
Yeah, and one final reminder, be sure to register for Innovate 2015 if you haven't already done so. Leslie Fisher is a featured presenter.
It's gonna be awesome.
And if you haven't seen her before, she's kind of a big deal.
Kind of a big deal.
Just kind of. So you can register again at go.osu.edu/innovate. And we look forward to seeing you guys on May 15th. So until then, so long. Thanks for coming.